Audio summary for Supercommunicators. How to unlock the secret language of connection. Picture this. You're at a family dinner and the conversation turns to politics. One person's voice rises, another shuts down, and suddenly you're all talking past each other. Or maybe you're at work trying to pitch an idea, but your boss just isn't hearing you. We've all been there. Those moments where connection feels impossible. But what if there's a way to navigate these conversations, to truly hear and be heard? That's the promise of Supercommunicators. How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection, a 2024 book by Charles Duhigg. Duhigg, the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Power of Habit, takes us on a journey into the art and science of communication. Over the next 50 minutes or so, we'll explore his insights, why some people seem to connect effortlessly, how they do it, and how you can too. From jury rooms to CIA missions, from vaccine skeptics to heated debates, we'll see what makes conversations work and what makes them fall apart. Let's get started. Part 1. What makes a supercommunicator? So, who are these supercommunicators Duhigg writes about? They're not just charismatic extroverts or smooth talkers. They're people who can steer a conversation to a meaningful conclusion, whether it's resolving a conflict, building trust, or inspiring action. They can tackle tough topics without causing offense, make others feel at ease, and create a sense of shared understanding. Think of a juror who sways a divided room to consensus, or a CIA officer who wins over a reluctant spy. These are supercommunicators in action. Duhigg argues that communication is a superpower, one we can all develop. At its core, it's about connection, not just exchanging words, but aligning with someone on a deeper level. He introduces a key idea. Every conversation is really 3 conversations happening at once. There's the practical, what are we talking about? The emotional, how do we feel? And the social, who are we in this moment? Supercommunicators excel because they recognize which conversation is dominant, and they match it. Take a practical conversation. You're discussing who's picking up the kids. If your partner's feeling overwhelmed, but you keep focusing on logistics, you're missing the emotional layer. They might need support, not a schedule. Or consider a social conversation. You're chatting with a coworker about a project, but they're dropping hints about their identity as a perfectionist. If you ignore that, you might push too hard and lose their trust. Duhigg's big insight is the matching principle. To connect, you need to align with the other person's conversation type. If they're emotional, share your feelings. If they're practical, focus on solutions. This isn't about manipulation. It's about listening closely to what's said and unsaid, and responding in kind. He illustrates this with a story about a young CIA officer recruiting a reluctant foreign agent. The agent was hesitant, fearful. His conversation was emotional. The officer could have pushed with facts or threats, but instead, he shared his own vulnerabilities, matching the emotional tone. That alignment built trust, and the agent opened up. Supercommunicators don't just talk. They listen, adapt, and create a space where everyone feels heard. That's the foundation we'll build on as we dive deeper. Part 2. The 3 types of conversations. Let's break down those 3 conversation types, because they're the heart of Duhigg's framework. First, the practical conversation. What's this really about? These are the what discussions: planning, problem-solving, decision-making. They're about facts, goals, and outcomes. Imagine you're on a jury debating a verdict. One juror in Duhigg's example focuses on evidence, timelines, and logic, keeping it practical. But if others are stuck on their emotions about the case, the conversation stalls. Supercommunicators notice this mismatch and bridge the gap. Second, the emotional conversation. How do we feel? These are about sharing and processing emotions, not fixing them. Duhigg tells of a doctor trying to convince a cancer patient to take a less risky treatment. The patient kept resisting, and the doctor kept piling on stats, a practical approach. But the patient was scared, wrestling with fear of losing control. She needed an emotional conversation, validation of her feelings, not more data. The doctor failed to connect because he didn't match her mode. A better approach? The doctor could have said, "I can see this feels overwhelming. Let's talk about what's scaring you." That simple shift opens the door to connection. Supercommunicators don't rush to solutions in emotional moments. They listen, reflect, and share their own feelings to align. Third, the social conversation. Who are we? These are about identity, belonging, and how we see ourselves in relation to others. Duhigg unpacks this through a story about a heated gun control debate between NRA members and activists. Both sides started entrenched, shouting past each other. But one participant, a supercommunicator, shifted the tone. They asked about personal experiences, like, "What does owning a gun mean to you?" Or, "Why does safety matter so much in your community?" These questions tapped into social identities: hunter, parent, survivor. And suddenly, the group wasn't just debating policies, they were sharing stories. Duhigg notes that social identities shape how we talk and listen. If you ignore them, you risk alienation. But if you engage them, like asking about someone's values, you build a bridge. The trick is recognizing which conversation is happening. Duhigg says we often misfire because we're not aligned. You might be in practical mode while your friend needs emotional support, or you're sharing feelings while your boss wants to focus on identity and roles. Supercommunicators excel at spotting these layers and adapting. They ask questions, listen for cues, and match the mood, whether it's a NASA interview, a Netflix team meeting, or a family argument. Part 3. The 4 Rules to Align and Connect. So how do you become a supercommunicator? Duhigg boils it down to 4 practical rules, skills anyone can learn. Let's walk through them, with examples to bring them to life. Rule 1. Pay attention to what kind of conversation is occurring. This goes back to the 3 types: practical, emotional, social. You need to identify the dominant mode. Duhigg shares a story from the writer's room of The Big Bang Theory. The team was stuck on a script, arguing over plot points, a practical conversation. But one writer noticed the real issue. Some team members felt unheard, a social tension tied to their roles as newbies versus veterans. By pausing to ask, "What does success look like for each of us here?" they shifted to a social conversation, aligned, and moved forward. Rule 2. Share your goals and ask what others are seeking. This is about clarity and alignment. If you don't know what someone wants from a conversation, you can't connect. Duhigg recounts a NASA interview where a candidate struggled to connect with the panel. The candidate kept listing achievements, but the interviewers wanted to know his motivations, why he wanted the role. A super communicator on the panel asked, "What drives you to join NASA?" That question aligned their goals. His passion matched their mission. And the conversation flowed. Try this yourself. Next time you're in a tricky talk, pause and ask, "What are we both hoping to get out of this?" It's a game changer. Rule 3. Ask about others' feelings and share your own. This is key for emotional conversations. Duhigg highlights a study of couples in therapy. Successful pairs didn't just solve problems, they shared emotions. One partner might say, "I feel overwhelmed when the house is messy," and the other responds, "I get that. I feel stressed too when I can't keep up." That mutual sharing creates what Duhigg calls neural entrainment, when your brain waves literally sync up during a good conversation. He contrasts this with a failed vaccine conversation. A doctor lectured a skeptical patient with facts, but the patient felt dismissed. A supercommunicator would have asked, "How do you feel about vaccines?" and shared their own concerns, creating a safe space to connect. Rule 4. Explore if identities are important to this discussion. Social conversations hinge on identity: parent, employee, activist. Duhigg revisits the gun control debate. When participants shared stories tied to their identities, they found common ground. One NRA member talked about hunting with his dad. An activist shared her fear after a local shooting. Suddenly, they weren't enemies. They were people. You can do this too. Ask questions like, "What does this mean to you?" Or, "How does this tie into your life?" It's not about agreeing. It's about understanding. These rules aren't rigid laws. They're tools. Duhigg emphasizes looping for understanding, a technique where you repeat what someone says in your own words, then check if you got it right. Like, "It sounds like you're frustrated because you feel unheard. Did I get that?" This shows you're listening, builds trust, and keeps you aligned. Part 4. Real-world applications. Let's see these ideas in action across different contexts. Duhigg's book is packed with stories that show how supercommunicators operate and what happens when we fail to connect. First, a jury room. A juror in a heated case faced a deadlock. Half the room saw the defendant as guilty, the other half didn't. The practical conversation, evidence and facts, was going nowhere. One juror, a supercommunicator, shifted gears. They asked, "How does everyone feel about the defendant's story?" This moved the group to an emotional conversation where jurors shared doubts and fears. Then they asked, "What does justice mean to us here?" A social question. By matching all three layers, they reached consensus. Next, a doctor and a vaccine skeptic. The doctor kept pushing data, but the patient felt judged. Her identity as a cautious parent was under attack. Duhigg contrasts this with a supercommunicator approach. A doctor who asked, "What worries you most about vaccines?" and shared, "I've had concerns too, but here's why I trust them." That emotional and social alignment opened the patient up to listening. Then there's the workplace. At Netflix, a team struggled with conflict. New hires felt sidelined by veterans. A leader used Duhigg's rules. They asked about goals. What do we each want from this project? Feelings. How's this dynamic making us feel? And identities. What roles do we play here? The conversation shifted from tension to collaboration. These stories show why supercommunication matters. In a polarized world, think online debates where people just call each other names. Connection is rare. Duhigg points out that the internet often strips away emotional and social cues, leaving us stuck in practical mode, arguing facts. Supercommunicators bring those layers back, even in tough situations like race discussions or family fights. They don't just talk, they connect. Part 5. Becoming a supercommunicator. So how do you put this into practice? Duhigg's book isn't just theory, it's a guide. Let's wrap up with some actionable steps to become a supercommunicator in your own life. First, listen with intent. Supercommunicators don't just hear words, they listen for the conversation type. Next time you're talking, ask yourself, is this practical, emotional, or social? If your friend's venting about a bad day, don't jump to advice. Match their emotional mode by saying, "That sounds exhausting. I've felt that way too." Second, ask deep questions. Duhigg emphasizes questions that draw out values and experiences, not just facts. Instead of, "Where do you work?" try, "What do you love about your job?" Instead of, "What happened?" ask, "How did that make you feel?" These invite vulnerability and connection. Third, practice looping for understanding. After someone shares something, rephrase it and check. "So you're saying you feel overlooked at work. Did I get that right?" This simple act shows you're engaged and keeps you aligned. Fourth, share your own feelings and goals. Vulnerability builds trust. If you're in a tough talk, say something like, "I'm feeling nervous bringing this up, but I want us to understand each other." That opens the door for the other person to share too. Finally, be mindful of identities. Whether it's a coworker's role, a friend's background, or your own biases, identities shape how we communicate. In a disagreement, ask, "What does this issue mean to you?" You'll learn more than any argument can teach. Duhigg's big takeaway? Connection is a skill, not a gift. You don't have to be born a super communicator. You can become one. Start small. Try one of these rules in your next conversation. Notice the difference. Over time, you'll build deeper, more meaningful connections. At work, with friends, even with strangers. We've covered a lot today, from the 3 conversations: practical, emotional, social, to the 4 rules that help us align and connect. We've seen super communicators in action, from jury rooms to doctors' offices, and learned how to bring their skills into our own lives. Super communicators isn't just about talking better, it's about living better. Duhigg reminds us that deep connections with family, friends, colleagues are what make life rich. In a world that's often divided, where we're more likely to shout online than listen, his message feels urgent. We can do better. We can connect. It's March 2025 now, and as I reflect on this book, I'm struck by its hopefulness. Whether you're navigating a tough family talk, a work conflict, or just trying to understand someone different, these tools can help. So, what's your next step? Maybe it's asking a deeper question today, or really listening to someone's feelings tomorrow. Whatever it is, you've got the skills now. Thanks for joining me on this journey through Supercommunicators: how to unlock the secret language of connection. Here's to better conversations and better connections in your life. Until next time.